It's 1971. Intel has just released the first microprocessor, the 4004. Jim Morrison has been found dead in a bathtub in Paris. And Fiat launched the 130 Coupe, a model for which there was no demand and with a mission that it was destined to fail. Up to the late 60s, Fiat had dominated the Italian car market with small economical cars, but things were changing. Italy was becoming much more affluent and the car market in general was opening up. The worry for Fiat was that upmarket imports from abroad, from maybe Germany and so on, would impact its market share at home, whilst the existing products weren't correctly placed to increase their market share abroad. So a decision was made to move upmarket. That started with the Fiat Dino Coupe and Spider, but the full thrust of it came with the 130 series. A saloon to take on Mercedes and a coupe to rival BMW. On paper, it should have been a surefire hit. A body by Pininfarina, an engine designed by the guy who worked on Ferrari's race V12s, an advanced chassis, and a luxurious interior. So why did it fail? They only made 4,200 of these, as against over 30,000 BMW E9 coupes. Let's find out what went wrong. Let's start off by talking about the interior. It looks like no other Fiat that came before it, or to be quite honest, after it. It's really spacious in here. It's got wood trimmings everywhere, lovely thick carpets. This particular car's got different trim on the seats. Generally, it would have come with that teddy bear sort of Vela that some people love. I think leather was an option, and they're now trimmed half Alcantara, half leather. But there are some touches in here that show you quite how far Fiat went at the time. There's a hand throttle there, like an early version of cruise control. Then if you look at here, where the glove box is so neatly concealed into the dash at the top there, you have another glove box bin at the bottom. There's a little lever right on the side which unlocks the passenger door, so you don't have to lean over to do that yourself. It had sun blinds at the back. The steering wheel is adjustable for rake and for length as well. The seats are even height adjustable. The rear windows, they open a fraction with a little beautifully made little lever. The door cappings at the bottom, it's got a stainless steel with lovely etched pattern in there. To access the boot, you pull the number plate away and that reveals the locking mechanism. The boot itself, of course, is absolutely massive and just about perfect for a couple of bodies. I think if there's any car that embodies Mafia, then this has to be it. Must mention though that there are a couple of areas in which the interior is a little bit let down. You've got all this lovely wood, but some of the switchgear, I think for the heating in particular, looks a little bit cheap. And that center plaque there with the Fiat 130 on it, I think they could have made a little bit more effort than that. But I think what really comes across is the rest of it. The general design, that lovely, I know to mention it again, but the way they hid the glove box, it's just a car for which there is so much more attention to detail than you realize. When it comes to styling, I don't think anyone can argue how impactful this is and what a striking, elegant design Pininfarina came up with, on top of which the whole car was actually assembled and put together, hand assembled at his factory. When it came to the technological side, Fiat didn't skimp either. So the chassis featured disc brakes all round, independent suspension at each corner. Reviews at the time said generally that they were very favourable. They said that it handled very well, that it was a comfortable car to drive. And having driven it today, I can confirm those impressions. Now, it's very much a luxury GT. It doesn't really have a strong sporting flavour, I think at the time also maybe the brakes were criticised a little bit, but if you take the standards of that era, they're pretty much fine. The steering, being assisted of course, is wonderfully light, and this has a sort of a rightness, a stability to it through the faster flowing bends that I think really suits its character. It doesn't lean overly much. You can feel a little bit those high profile tyres moving around, so it's not the ultimate in terms of precision and so on, but really the way it drove and handled wasn't a problem. It's very refined, it's a very smooth engine as well. Let's see how it feels when we give it a little bit of throttle. Now it's a nice sounding lump and it's very, very smooth. I think that Borg-Warner 3-speeder is a little bit of the weak point here, and Robert, who owns the car, did warn me that it's probably one of the weaker links, but driven normally, you absolutely don't notice it. It does exactly what you need. That engine, which in a way is such a plus point for the car, it has such incredible heritage, designed by the same person who did the Fiat Twin Cam, Aurelio Lampredi, who also designed some of Ferrari's race engines and the Dino V6. And technically, in some ways, it's quite similar. It's got an iron bottom end, aluminium head. Admittedly, it's only a single cam at the top. But one of the reasons why this was hampered is that from a 3.2, they only managed to get 165 horsepower. When you're driving it now, that doesn't really matter, because as a classic, you're going to appreciate it for what it is. And that is an incredible wafter. It's a little bit like a junior Italian Rolls-Royce in feel, or perhaps an Italian Jag. It's very comfortable. It has a little bit more sporting intent than that perhaps, but that is really its major role. The engine's wonderfully smooth. The suspension is soft enough. It handles okay in the bends though, it doesn't just sort of collapse. But you can understand at the time, when you were getting this as a new car, the fact that it only had 118 mile an hour top speed when its competitors were closer to 130, 135, even 140, that would have made you think twice, and that the power was quite miserly. They're also, even though they're not that quick, they are supposed to be pretty thirsty. Now there is quite an interesting discussion as to why Fiat chose to do this. Some people say that because by then the company was already involved with Ferrari, they didn't want to tread on their toes. And if you look at the way the engine is fed, you can see what's going on there. So you have that airbox, which in itself, the air intake is about that big. That in itself is going to restrict things simply by changing the intake and adding maybe 2 or 3 carbs, so you can up the power significantly on these. So it does seem like they made a conscious decision to do that. Look, it may only have 165 horsepower, but in a classic car, you don't notice it. What you want in this is the torque, the effortless torque, and I think it works really well. In the UK, I don't think they sold hardly any manuals. I'm not sure if they marketed them at all. It is the kind of car for which you can excuse a Slushmatic 3-speeder like this, because overall, maybe it makes sense. Back in the day, it was considered to be a luxury option as well. There was another huge problem. You could get an XJ12 in the UK for £3,200. That would have come as standard with 260 horsepower, and it was a V12. But say more, its real competitor perhaps to me would have been the BMW E9. Now you could get the 3-litre CS for the same price as one of these, £5,300 in 1971. So you're trying to peddle a lowly Fiat to people for the same price as a BMW, a pretty BMW as well. And in terms of power figures, this falls woefully short. Of course, the Fiat did have other advantages. There was the styling by the Pininfarina, the fact that it was a much more modern looking car. The interior also is much better appointed, more luxurious. All the attention to detail that they did, though, was wasted because they hobbled that engine. Now, to be fair, the fact that it was a Fiat alone might have been enough to stop people buying it in large numbers, but if you add it all up, you can see where this is going. Very expensive car, which didn't perform technically, in terms of speed anyway, didn't perform as well as its rivals. It was always going to struggle. And you also have to understand at the front, I mean, this is a unique engine. It was only used in the 130 series. Both the saloon and this car, it seems as if Fiat went absolutely all out in the design phase, doing some of the stuff to them, and then at the end just sort of lost interest. So as a result, they're incredible cars that just didn't hit the mark. Now, this one is owned by a really interesting character, Robert Mininghini, obviously of Italian origin. He came down today. Thank you so much for bringing it, buddy. And it has a few interesting things of its own. It's an absolutely beautiful car, so it's been restored so that everything looks very much close to perfect. Beautiful paint job, really clean underneath, but also everything still works on here, and there are some extra touches. He got it from an industrialist in Milan. He's the one who decided to reupholster the seats with the Alcantara and the leather rather than going to the Vela. I don't think that you can get the Vela at this point anyway. I do quite like it, but apparently it's quite a fragile material. He also had the steering wheel covered in leather, which makes it feel much, much nicer than the original, I don't know if it was plastic or Bakelite item. He's got a little sort of diplomatic flag holder there, and most of the time when he uses it, he has the Italian flag flying. So as with the saloon, this is a really interesting part of Italian car history. It's a Fiat like no other. The luxury element it is not a joke. It really was a proper luxury car with lots of thought that had been put in it. Maybe let down a little bit by the power of that engine, but I think that that's not enough. I think that the fact that it was a Fiat just meant that it would have been very difficult for them to pull off this move up market, even though they went for incredible bodywork. They went for a car which drove very well and which was genuinely luxurious. It's such a shame to see. I consider it a little bit maybe like a slightly sportier Italian Jaguar. It is lighter on its feet than a Jag. It's not quite as refined perhaps, but it does share something in common, but it's just a bit more exotic. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. If you have a car, one of your own cars that you want to bring down and film, then please get in touch and we'll see if we can arrange something. Thank you to Robert for bringing this down. Thank you to all of you for watching. And another one ticked off, another sort of brilliant car, but I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.